Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Speak the Truth in Love Ministry with Miss Veronica Mirembe Benedictio. And today is the Tuesday, 14th July 2026. I want to convey a message to the marrieds out there that I think I'll just call it Insights About Marriage by Miss Veronica Mirembe Benedictio. Njagala okwogera ku oba in Luganda, how can I, like ebintu ebiri like okubikkulirwa okuli mu bufumbo, like insights about marriage. Okay, let me basically call it knowledge about marriage. As Veronica, I am learning, or I have learned, that I believe we all need to understand as people of all age groups in different stages in their marriages, So one, and I think I'll speak to single girls mainly, but this message really relates to everyone at a certain stage in marriage, because I personally believe at times when you are an educator, it is something very good to share knowledge. It is something very beautiful to like to be generous with your knowledge if people are out there learning, So I believe, one, there's something I want to speak to the young single ladies, Do not just pray for a wedding, but pray for a covenant. Like, pray for a covenant, first of all, that is God glorifying, and a covenant that is going to help you fulfill your life purpose. Just like I keep telling us, I keep telling myself, we live in a generation where we basically prepare for a wedding but hardly prepare for marriage. Ante abantu abasinga kyebiva bigaana, kyebiva bitutama, kubanga embaga luba lunaku lumu, naye nga obufumbo bw'oyingiddemu ndagaano, it is a covenant. And I think lately we are seeing most of us enter marriage as a contract and not a covenant. Chovola abantu abasinga bigaana kuba tetutegedde mazima gali mu bintu bya bufumbo abantu bedda bye baategeeranga zenga Veronica oluusi bye njagala okusharingako. We have to know marriage is not just about easing loneliness, warming each other, but building the kingdom of God. Marriage is not just getting someone or kwejako loneliness, And it's like I tell most ladies in our generation, most of us get married because of fear of being alone, because because of loneliness, because of societal pressure. But most of us hardly know marriage is not just about easing loneliness and warming each other, But each marriage has a purpose attached to it. And that's why you see I keep telling us, marriage is not about romance and flowers, daily happiness, But marriage is about holiness. Marriage is about becoming Christ-like each and every day with your spouse. It is the reason we have to know, God-ordained unions are really fought, but they are a threat to the kingdom of darkness. Whenever your marriage has a purpose attached to it, you will realize the enemy fights it so much because he wants to kill that purpose behind your marriage. And we live in a generation where most of us hardly know that our marriages have a purpose attached to them. And it's the reason we are so impatient in marriage. Abantu abasinga bitutama mangu kubanga tetumanyi nti oluusi obufumbo bwaffe emabega waabwo abeerayo ekigendererwa Katonda kye yateekawo. And it's the reason patience is very, very important when you get to know that your marriage has a purpose attached to it. Whenever you know that your marriage has a purpose attached to it, like the devil will fight hard to tear it up through things like unresolved conflict, because he's aware your partnership is a threat to the kingdom of darkness. Whenever the enemy knows that your partnership, that your covenant is a threat to the kingdom of darkness, he will fight hard to tear it. And this is why I'm telling people out there, whenever you know your marriage has a purpose attached to it, you will handle or resolve conflicts differently because you are sure your marriage has a purpose attached to it. You know, it is why I'm speaking to single ladies out there. Do not just get married to ease loneliness. Not just get married to have children. But get married, like pray for a covenant that has your purpose attached to it. Because at times when all the romance is over, it is purpose that holds a marriage. You know, it is the purpose behind your marriage that will hold it, because you have known, you know, you have a covenant that you have to, like, that is fighting a kingdom of darkness, and you have to remain in your covenant because it has a purpose attached to it. We live in a generation where we are so impatient because most of us hardly know that our marriages have a purpose attached to them. You know, we live in a very impatient generation. Abantu abasinga tetulina bugumiikiriza mu bufumbo. Abantu abasinga tetulina, like, obufumbo bw'ennaku zino obugaana lwakuba abantu abasinga tetulina bugumiikiriza. Kyova olaba ngamba abaana abawala bano abakola bridal shower yita basenga abagenda okuyigiriza okubeera omugumiikiriza mu bufumbo. You know, kubanga abantu abasinga tuli mu mulembe nga teri bugumiikiriza. You know, chovolaba abantu abasinga, we are disturbed because we do not know that patience is what holds a marriage. You know, we do not know simple things like forgiveness. Things like forgiveness, humility, character are what keep a marriage. Most of us are into this excitement of a wedding, which is a one-day thing. Banange ngenda nembulirira abaana abawala, abaana abalenzi, embaga luba lunaku lumu, buli omu n'abasiibula n'agenda. Kati ne mutandika olugendo lwammwe. Kati oba ky'oyingiddemu tokitegeera, ky'ovola myezi 3 babikutamye. Because you went into marriage out of excitement, but you did not have a revelation of what marriage is about. You know? Now let me speak to young people. We have to know we do not go for marriage to get, but we go for marriage to give. You are not going to get married to get happiness, to get children, to get, we go to marriage to give and not to get. Abantu abasinga wacha ebintu bitutama because we get married to have children. Chovola bawogenda abana ne bagaana obufumbo essanyu ne libula because you went to have children in marriage. But you hardly know that the reason God brings two people together is basically for companionship. It is not to have children. You know, Bible egamba nti abaana birabo okuva ewa Katonda. Naye ne baba tebannajja babaze, you have to be happy in your marriage because marriage is basically meant for companionship and not having children. You know, kyova olaba abantu abasinga waafumbirwa nalema okufuna omwana essanyu lifa mu bufumbo kubanga alowooza yagenda kufuna baana. But we have to know marriage is not just about having children. Children are a bonus from God. So whether you have them or not, choose to be happy in your marriage because marriage is basically for companionship and not for children. You know, it is why I speak to ladies out there who are in marriages and battling barrenness. You have no happiness in your marriage because you have not yet had children, and it is what is stressing you because you have not known marriage is meant for companionship. Chovola abantu abasinga n'abalina abaana, abaana ebakula ne bava waka, ne baleka mu ababiri mu nnyumba gw'omwami n'omukyala nga tewamanya nti you went for tewabeera ssanyu kuba walowooza abaana bebakutwala mu bufumbo. It is why I speak to parents. You will produce children and they will live in your home and they also go to their homes. They'll go to boarding schools. Kati abana anabaga tebatabeerawo. Chovola ba ewakati wabassanyu kubanga mwafumbirwa kufuna baana, which is wrong. You know, we have to know marriage is about companionship. It is not just about children, but companionship. And the reason, with children or without, you have to be happy in your marriage. Because the whole purpose of marriage is not just children, but companionship. You know? And this is the reason I tell people, go with your friend. Because when you go with your friend, you will be happy with them even without children. You know? It's the reason I'm telling people out there, we go to marriage to give and not to get. Tugenda mu bufumbo okugaba so kufuna. We go to marriage to give of our time, to sacrifice. It is the reason I tell young girls, you do not go to marriage to get orgasms. You go to marriage to give orgasms. We do not get married to get happiness, but we go to marriage to take happiness. Togenda kufumbirwa kufuna sanyu, naye ogenda kutwalayo sanyu. Naye abantu abasinga tetumanyi kubikulwa kuli mu bintu bino. Shovola botuka mbufumbo, n'olaba oba oluusi sex tanyumye n'ogamba oba biki ebyandeetewo omusajja, because you think you went to get orgasms, but you do not know you go to marriage to give. You know, we go to marriage to give and not to get, but most of us do not know that. You know, and it is the reason when we have such revelations, we can never be wounded in our marriages, because you know, you do not go to marriage to get. You do not go to marriage to get happiness. You go to give happiness. You do not go to marriage to get peace, but you go to marriage to give peace. And the reason, we have to work on our character before thinking about marriage. You know, no, marriage is not just about romance and flowers. It's not about daily happiness, because there will be unhappy days. There are mundane days in marriage and exciting days. You know, and the reason you have to know, echintwala mbufumbo sisanyu lyoka, because buli bufumbo bubeeramu disagreements, wabeerawo conflict, but malaika taliyo. You know, in every relationship, conflicts are inevitable. And it is why I speak to couples. People have to know, disagreeing with your spouse does not make them your enemy. Because remember, you are two people from different backgrounds and personalities God has brought together. And you can never agree on everything. And that is what makes marriage. But most of us, people hardly understand that marriage is about covering each other's weaknesses. Chovola, when disagreements arise, people think they are enemies in a home, and they hardly know they only open doors for the enemy to fight their marriages, because they are not using wisdom. You know, I speak to couples out there. You have to know, you have to make it a point. You can disagree to agree with your spouse, but still remain one. You can disagree to agree, but still respect and love each other. Because that is the reason God knew a man will leave his mother and father and go and be joined to his wife. Netuli mumulembe wochankalamu n'omusajja nze nzira waffe, because you have not known togenda kusanga malayika. Chovola banze ngamba abaana abawala abasajja ne wozunge tewali atuukiridde, buli omu abeera n'ebibye. And it is why God knew he brings two people in a covenant where they have to cover each other's weaknesses. You know, he knows one's weaknesses are the other one's strength, and one's strength are the other one's weaknesses. But most of us just concentrate on their weaknesses, and that is how we fail to see the beauty in our marriages, because we are concentrating on our weaknesses as spouses in their marriages. You know, it is the reason you have to know. You do not have to fight in your marriage, but fight for your marriage. There is a difference between fighting in your marriage and fighting for your marriage. No, people have to know. We live in a world where forces of darkness want to hear people have separated. Abantu okwawukana, abakyala okudda ewaabwe, abaami lyessanyu ly'ensi. Kyova olaba olina okulwanira mu bufumbo bwo so tolwanyisa bufumbo bwo. Because at the end of the day, conflict, disagreements will arise. They are inevitable in marriage. They cannot be avoided. But what makes the difference is the way people handle conflicts. It is why I tell people there is nothing called a perfect marriage. There is nothing called a perfect spouse. People have worked out their marriages. The way people handle conflict is what makes the difference. Abantu bonna bafuna obutategeeragana n'engeri gye bakwatamu obutategeeragana bwe bumaking a difference mu bufumbo. Oli ajja kunyiigira omusajja amuyita embizzi gwe, oli ajja kunyiigira omukazi amuyita embwa gwe. Naye abalala nga babeera ne disagreements nene like ne basolving ebintu byabwe. It is why we have to know. Marriage is known for the unforgiving, the bad-tempered, the easily angered. Kyenva ngamba abantu buli wootakola kutempayo nga tonnafumbirwa tojja bifumbayo. For the impatient. Marriage is not for the impatient. Omusajja akoze kino nzira waffe, omusajja yamboggoledde, taliyo togenda musangayo ataboggola. But at the end of the day, it is knowing you have not gone with a saint, ate malayika taliyo. You know, marriage is about becoming a better person every day. You know, growing in daily grace, growing in humility, growing in forgiveness, growing in kindness, growing in selflessness, you know, sacrificing your ego. No, let me speak to men out there. When you do not work on your ego before you get it, toja kuma mchala. Oli musajja, but you have ego issues you have not worked on. No, let me speak to men out there. Work on your ego as a man. Because there are certain things, a rich wallet will get you a woman. But when you do not, when you know how to control your ego, you will not keep a woman. You know, marriage is growing daily in a Christ-like character with your spouse. Because remember, you are two different people with weaknesses. You are supposed to cover each other instead of concentrating and exposing your weaknesses to the world. No gamba kati omwami anyiziza wano Yesu yakolanga chi, yaberanga hambo, wano Yesu yakolanga chi. Because it is growing, it is growing daily in the Christ-like character. Chobola abantu abayina eddiini mu bufumbo bwabwe babeera banjawulo. Kubanga omusajja tajja kuyita mukyala mbizigwe ng'ayina embala ya Katonda, ng'ayina ebibala eby'omwoyo. Omukazi tajja kuyita musajja mbwaggwe ng'ayina ebibala eby'omwoyo. It is what I tell people. Marriage is growing daily in a Christ-like character. Omwami akunyiza no Yesu yakolanga atya. Omwami you know, it is growing daily in the Christ-like character. You know, okweto was a humility. You know, abachala respecting men. Because there are things we take for granted, but they are ruining the entire generation because we have not known certain truths. No, there are things I tell people. Ngawe nabasome echawanikibwa kye nasome video yange ese waliwo video gye na sharinga in Proverbs 14:1 egamba omukyalo omugezigezi azimba ennyumba ye n'amagezi naye omusirusiru agimenyamenya n'emikono gye. That a wise woman builds her house with wisdom, but a foolish one tears it with her own hands. Even a wise man builds his house with wisdom. At times we are exposing our marriages to the world, and we do not know we are giving the world weapons to fight our marriages. Ogenda oyogera ku mwami wo, oyogera ku weaknesses ze, oyogera ku mukyala we, naye nga tomanyi nti ensi ogiwa ebyokulwanyisa obufumbo bwo. You are giving the world weapons to steal your inner peace in your marriage because you are exposing your marriage. And people hardly know. Buli bufumbo buyina ebyabo. Kati ne b'obuulira nabo balina bye bayitamu. Naye tomanyi nti muba mweswaza mwekka. It is what I tell women, it's what I tell myself. You are exposing your spouse, naye nga ne gw'obuulira alina by'ayitamu, naye y'abikubuulira. And we only give the world weapons to fight our marriages because we are not using wisdom. We are exposing our marital issues, our marital conflict to the world, but we hardly know we are giving the world weapons to fight our marriages because we are opening doors through lacking wisdom. Whenever you open doors in your marriage, you only expose your spouse, you're exposing your spouse's weaknesses to people. Remember, each of us has our weaknesses. Even that pastor gogena n'obuulira ebizibu byo naye alina weaknesses ze. N'ogenda n'omudawulo omanyi omusajja akola kino kati n'ova mu church n'alyoka akufuula emboozi. Obufumo ne bubeera mu church nga buli omu aboogerako. But because you did not use wisdom, you are exposing your spouse to a pastor who is also human, who also has his weaknesses. You know? No, there are things I tell married women. We only hand the enemy power to fight our marriages because we are exposing our marriages to people. Ogendo onyumizaako sister wo, onyumiza maama wo. kankubuulire kyobola ate wotegeregana n'omwami wo obeera nga waweebuula omuntu wo mu bantu. And that is what I speak to us. I speak to men, I speak to women. It is why we have to know, do not give the world weapons to fight your marriage, because you are not, because you are not using wisdom. It is what I'm sharing. It is why I'm sharing some of these insights with the generation, because we have to know you have not gone with a saint. Togenda kusanga malaika. Buli omu tewali musajja atuukidde, tewali mukyala atuukiridde. Kyovola bakyengamba abaana abawala, kyengamba abaana abalenzi. Wosanga omuntu ng'alina 80% of your list, gumobeereyo. Kuba togenda kusanga alina 10 ku 10, taliiyo. It is the reason God knows marriage is meant for complementing each other. It is why I speak to people out there. At the end of the day, when you know certain truths about marriage, it is why you will stay in your marriage. You will not look for other options, because you have no, because people, there is no perfect person. Malaika taliyo. However, you keep running from one man to another, from one woman to buli omu alina package ye. Kati mukama alina package gye yakuwa ng'olina ojjugumira obeere mu bufumbo bwo. Kyenva ngamba abaana abawala, do not pray for a wedding, but pray for a covenant that aligns with the heavens and God's will for your life. Because marriage is not just about romance and flowers. It is why we are told, I think we hear these speeches on the wedding day. Marriage is not a bed of roses. It is true, it's not just something easy, but marriage is what you make it. How come we are seeing people are successful in their marriages, but some are not? It is because they have known certain truths. Marriage is becoming a better person every day, growing in daily grace, growing in humility, growing in forgiveness, growing in kindness, in self-control, in love. Bino byembulirira bannange, mulimu ebintu ebimu ng'ogenda bisoma mu Bible. When you read Proverbs chapter 15 verse 1, it says, a gentle answer turns away anger, but a rude answer brings anger. Omwami n'akoma weewaka, n'ombuuza, walidde emmere nagiriddewa? Omukyala n'akubuuza, sokisi zange, n'obuuza omukyala, sokisi zange nzazitereka. Kati nga the way, like the tone of communication, yereeta disagreement in your home, because you have not known nti okuddamu n'eggonjebwa kijjawo ekiruyi. Naye abantu ne babeera nga tonzi zino ze tukozesa mu communication mu marriage ze zitta obufumbo bwaffe. We have very disrespectful tones, and that is why the devil fights our marriage. It is what I'm speaking to people. When we get to know marriage is spiritual warfare. When you go to marriage, I think I'll share this in my other video about marriage. Marriage is not, we have to know marriage is spiritual warfare. It is why when you get a revelation that Ephesians 6:12 says, Torana namsaina mubiri, ojja kumanya nti bba osiga olwanya naye. Naye olwana na myoyo, emyoyo gy'ekika, emyoyo gy'ebukojja, egiwaakinga hadde okuzza ewammwe. And there are certain truths we have to learn about marriage that will keep us in our marriages. Because at times people are fighting their spouses, but they hardly know they are fighting spirits that only reign in their spouses. It is what I'm speaking to people out there. When we get to know certain truths, it is how we know how to handle our marriages. It is how we know how to keep our marriages. You are exposing your spouse. Olia ononyumya ku mwami wo, omanyi akola kino, omanyi akola kino, but you hardly know you are only handing the world weapons to fight your marriage, to fight your peace. So there are certain truths we have to learn before we think about marriage. Purpose is what carries a marriage when feelings and emotions fluctuate. It is why I'm speaking to single ladies out there. Pray for a covenant that has purpose attached to it. Pray for a covenant that carries purpose, because purpose is what keeps you together amid this conflict, because you are aware your relationship has a purpose attached to it. It has a heavenly agenda and mandate. The reason walking away is not an option, because you have a heavenly agenda and mandate upon your marriage, and the reason walking away is not an option. It is knowing you have gone in a covenant where you agree to disagree, but still love and respect each other, because that is what marriage is about. It is not about finding a perfect partner, but becoming the perfect partner. Chenvambulira nange Veronica nebulira. I'm not praying for a saint, but I pray to become a better person every day, to grow in character, to grow in humility, to grow in forgiveness. Where you have a covenant that has a heavenly agenda attached to it. It is knowing that two imperfect people can never agree on everything, because we are created by God uniquely for His glory. Remember, you are two imperfect and you can never agree on everything. Chobola bomwami wa kunyiza tobeera okugwa kubanga temusobola kukkiriza muli different. It is why it is called a covenant. We are all created uniquely with different thoughts and opinions. The reason disagreements are inevitable in marriage. People have different thinkings and mindsets, and they can never agree on everything. And the reason you have to know, how to handle conflicts with a very respectful and calm tone in case of disagreements in marriage. Conflicts will be there, but the tones we use to address these conflicts also matters a lot. Our tones matter a lot in handling disagreements. The way we handle disagreements will either make our marriage or break it. People get disagreements, but it is godly, But at the end of the day, how do you handle disagreements? Are you going to walk away from your marriage because of a disagreement? It is what I'm speaking to people out there. There are truths we have to know about marriage. It is not about daily happiness, but growing daily in the fruit of the Spirit, growing in love, growing in patience, growing in kindness, growing in humility. It is daily growing in the fruit of the Spirit. Because remember, you are two different people who are going to stay, who are living together every day. And at the end of the day, conflicts are very inevitable. But knowing that disagreements in marriage will be there. But they will, you won't walk away from your marriage because of a disagreement. No, there are things I tell people. Woba osobola okudisagreeinga ne mama owuwo yakere ncha nakuteka ku nsi. Woba osobola okudisagreeinga ne baganda abo bokuze nabo bulambo bonna. Kati omwami ono gosanze obusanzi mu kkubo. Lwaki olowooza nti wonna disagreeinga nti mugenda kuagreeinga? Because that is how God knew. And the reason you should not walk away from your marriage because of conflict or disagreement. Because at the end of the day, what makes us human is disagreements. It is what I'm speaking to ladies out there. I'm speaking to myself. Most marriages are so disturbed because most of us want to prove a point. We want to be understood. There are things I speak to women, what to men, like chigasachi to prove a point, but you're losing your marriage because you want to prove a point. It is because we have not known certain truths. Veronica nga wembize. I don't think I'll walk away from my marriage because I have known certain truths. Togenda kusanga malaika buli omu alina pepa ye. Kati mukama kyakuwadde womanyi nti okoze endagaano tuula. You are not going to walk away from your marriage lwakuba omusajja yanyiiziza, omusajja yankoze kino. Because at the end byebyo biri mu mulembe abantu tebalina bugumiikiriza. And that's why you see we are living in a disturbed generation, because we hardly know our marriages have a purpose attached to them. We are not patient as a generation, and that's why things are not working out. We lack patience as a generation. Emyezi esatu nga bikutamye lwaki omusajja yabogodde naye nga tewagenze na malayika taliyo. And that's why we are told you have to work on your marriage every day. It is covering each other's weak. No, marriage, there are things like marriage is love is not a feeling, it is a choice. Because feelings fade. But love is a choice. It is what 1 Corinthians chapter 13 says. Love is patient, love is kind, love is humble. It is not easily angered. Love is a choice. It is not a feeling. It is why you have to choose your spouse every day. Wadenga yakunyiziza, but because it is a choice you made to love them. You have this, but because you chose. Love is not a feeling. It is a choice. Because feelings fluctuate with time. Emotions go with time. And it's the reason I speak to these young girls. Whenever you think you're entering marriage, that because you that you have feelings for a man, emotions will go away. Because at the end of the day, marriage is not just about romance, daily happiness, but are you ready to stand with someone even in the hard times? Are you ready to be there for them, or you'll walk away because things get bad? It is what I speak to myself when we know truths about marriage as a generation. They will take us far. Banange tubere bachala bagumikiriza mbufumbo, tubere abami because we live in a temuli bugumikiriza. Chovola ebintu bigana. Because we lack patience as a generation. And what brings this? We hardly know our marriages have a purpose attached to them. And it's why people walk away from their marriages, because we lack patience as a generation. Impatience is a demon that kills marriages. It is what I'm telling young people out there. It is patience. It is about selflessness. It's about sacrifice, humility, showing daily grace to your spouse. Yakunyiziza neno amkama. Wano mkama yandikoza ate nawe no mulage chisa kwa nae toli malaika. Where you don't concentrate on your spouse's weaknesses because you are neither perfect. And that is what disturbs most marriages. You concentrate on your spouse's weaknesses and you hardly see their strengths. And it's why people fail to see the beauty in marriage. And because we don't know, our weaknesses are what make us human. God knew two different people who are imperfect with different weaknesses will come together and complement each other. You're focusing on a man's weaknesses, and that is why people have no happiness in their marriages. As I'm finishing this audio, let me speak to someone out there. Do not walk away from your marriage because of disagreements. Because disagreements are inevitable. Toina ogenda genda obere happen omuntu buli sawa. But at the end of the day, just work on handling disagreements with wisdom. With respectful tones, with humility, with showing daily grace to your spouse. And that's why I want to encourage someone in this video. Just know, fight hard to be patient in your marriage, because there is no perfect spouse, there is no perfect marriage, but work out your marriage. Do not fight in your marriage, but fight for your marriage, because at the end of the day, it has a purpose attached to it. Don't just walk away from your marriage because of disagreements, because of conflict. But always know your marriage has a purpose attached to it. Thank you very much for listening to me, and have a beautiful afternoon. Veronica Mirembe Benedictio.